the old Kool-Aid commercials? Where the guy, this had to be when you were a kid.
Oh, for sure.
The big jug of Kool-Aid would bust through the wall.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I
Remember those?
Yeah. That's what that reminded you of?
Yeah, when he made the
I
noise.
like it.
I know.
I like
oh
it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't that in a song too?
Probably.
Remember, ever see the movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off?
Yep.
It was in that movie.
Was it?
Yeah, he was, I don't know. He's
Oh,
running
yeah,
around.
yeah,
He's
yeah,
like,
yeah,
oh,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I remember the song.
I don't even know what it is, but
alright.
anyhow, here we are again.
It's not that important.
No, it's not. This is our 130th episode. I
Really,
just noticed. It's a lot.
It's a lot. That's a stick-to-itiveness right there, buddy.
I know.
Yep.
Thanks for sticking with us, people.
Yep. There's only 3 more topics left, and then we're gonna be done.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for listening, people, and making it more worth it every week. It's good.
Yeah.
Before we get into your stuff, because I know you want to chat it up here. We have all of our normal things to say. So, memberships are up. People still joining that, which is cool. Skill videos in there are cool. Discounts on the store stuff is cool. So you guys can check that out. The store is up. Online store on the website is up and running. Hats are there, shirts are there, sweaters, and then some other accessories. People are buying those, which is cool. It's cool figuring out the logistics of sending things all over North America and or Europe.
You think you just order something, you send it, but there's more to it.
There's so much to it.
Yeah.
You know what I didn't know? Did I tell you about the customs thing?
Yeah.
Did I tell you about it?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to tell the people about it.
Go ahead.
So when you send things across any kind of border, every single thing you send has been categorized by the Canadian government with a number. So when you put things in packages going over the border, you need to set the number of the thing to the thing so that they know what's in the box when you send it over.
Yeah.
So if hat, for example, there's a code that is for hats or things you put on your head, and I have to input that on the customs label before I ship it.
Yeah.
And they have for everything. Yeah. Literally for everything. And I can search anything, and they then tag a number so people know what's in it. Crazy. Had no idea.
So the border can scan and say, okay, good.
I had no idea that it was a thing.
Check and it's not a hat and it happens to be powder of some sort.
Yeah.
Then you're in trouble.
Isn't that crazy though? Like there's a thing you'd never think is a thing.
Well, this is the hard part about running a business. The hard thing about being a hockey player, it's a hard thing about anything is that you think you know and then you really didn't know.
You didn't know.
The more that you know, the less that you actually know.
I know. It's
about
crazy.
Something.
So that's been pretty interesting. So anyways, I'm doing my best with that. So if you guys are interested in merch stuff, it's all there online. You can get it through the website, through our social media links, etc. And then you guys can leave a 5-star review on the podcast. That's also helpful. And share it.
Yeah.
That's helpful too.
Yeah.
So that's all my podcast stuff. Do you have some bullshit you'd like to talk about before?
Well, this ain't bullshit, dude.
Okay.
This is the real deal.
Okay. Let's see.
Storm lost out last night.
Yeah, they did.
That's why I'm wearing my Gulf Storm hoodie.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
It was a heartbreaker.
You know what? I'm talking about a little bit. It is a little bit of tongue-in-cheek stuff, but there's a serious side to it too. I'm really proud of those kids. Like most of the people watching here, who cares about the Guelph Storm, but I do.
Yeah.
I got some really good, made some really good friends over the last 2 years with my son playing there, and my son's got buddies for life. You know, so they lost in overtime yesterday to a really, really good loaded up Sarnia Sting team. Lost in overtime. So people going into this series, because Guelph didn't start the season off real hot. But they worked through their issues, and they're one of the hottest teams just going into Christmas, right into the playoffs, and they just played great. But so they were seeded. They were up just to before Christmas. They were seeded one of the last place teams in the West Division, and they were in the battle for fourth, fifth, and then they ended up landing in fifth. Was it fifth? No, they played in sixth. So they ended up seeded against the Sarnia Sting, who loaded up, and they have just an incredible team. But anyways, my thing with that is like, it was great to see they were underdogs all day, right? And but the kids didn't believe it at all, and they took, with a couple, I wouldn't even say bounces. Like the first game was, Sarnia was just that much better the first game, but after that it was just a battle, and the kids played. Obviously they were so Sarnia has 9 NHL prospects. So at one point, I was watching the game yesterday, and I was telling one of my buds that I watched the games with, I said, look at this power play. I said, the goalie, 5 players on the ice for Sarnia, they're all signed in the NHL. And then they took Del Mastro off, and they put Cairo on, who's signed in the
Yeah.
NHL,
Yeah.
played against. We had a few draft picks on the Guelph team, and they just battled. Like the special teams were like just hard fought. Incredible to see the young guys. So it was awesome. So, anyways, I'm wearing my Guelph hoodie today.
As a
And
point of pride. I like it.
yeah, no, and it was like I wore it yesterday too. I didn't feel like changing, but it was great. But what I wanted to say about the other things I wanted to say about it is, number one is, the playoff experience in the once you get to those any level, playoff experience is huge because you could see, and we talked about playoffs the other day. You could see some guys nervous. Their play wasn't the same. Their sticks weren't the same, and when you're nervous, you make mental mistakes, or you're squeezing your stick, and because you're thinking, right, you're overthinking. Then once they settle in, you start to see some really good hockey. But the playoff experience is unreal. So and I'm not saying this just for the Guelph Storm; it's for anybody, right?
Mhm.
Once you get into that playoff groove where you have full arenas, which is so awesome,
It's
like
best, man.
the league this year was really good for attendance, anyways, but to see the playoffs, the music just turned up and like jam packed every night and
Yep.
loud and crazy.
Yep.
It's a different atmosphere, and it's like something that you actually have to get used to. And to see kids play in that environment, it's like there's no experience like it. So like learning, and so what I was saying to my kid the other day was like, this experience for you is, even though you didn't win, you learned what it takes to a certain degree, and maybe not totally yet, but you realize that, if you flip the script, you go in the underdog and you're playing a team that should walk through you pretty
Yeah.
easily based on the paper.
Mhm.
And so if you go and play their style, then you're probably going to get in that track meet and games are 7-1, like they're blowouts, or you're just can't keep up. But they were, obviously the coaching staff was smart enough to say, we're going to have to really defend hard and capitalize on bounces, which they did. So these kids has worked their asses off. So it shows you that even though you could be a number one team, you've got to play the game, and you could see. And I'm not. I hope this doesn't offend anyone on the Sarnia team because it's not meant to do that. But you can see that, it wasn't supposed to be this hard. You can see it. It's
Yep.
like frustrated. You can see guys shaking their heads. It's like, man, like got a great goal. You got guys that just blocking shots. We're outplaying them, but we're down again.
Yeah.
Right. So you just see that fight, and so for the kids going through it, both sides, is you realize that even though you're supposed to be the best, it's a battle, and if you're not dialed in and actually come to play and rest and do all the things you're supposed to do, it could bite you in the ass. And then as the underdogs, it's like maybe it's just you have nothing to lose, but when you play hard and you just put a belief in yourself, you just never know, right?
Mhm.
So that was like one aspect of it. You were going to say something.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say it was nice to two things. One is that it was nice to see they were down 3-0, and just talking with Charlie, he was saying that in the room, like, they didn't think they were done,
Not for one
which
second.
was great, and they were just a bounce away yesterday
Yep.
from taking it to game
Game 7, yeah.
So from down 3-0, coming back to make it 3-2, and they were 5 minutes away from a win last night, where they could have pushed it to game 7, and that would have been unbelievable. But one of the scouts from Sarnia sent me a text yesterday, and so we were chatting a little bit, and so I said, "Hey, congrats on the series win, whatever." And he said the same thing you just said. He was like, "Yeah, what a tough team, man. Like, what a tough team. Hard games." And you could see that it wasn't a walk in the park. You could see the reaction from Sarnia when they won yesterday too. That it was like that was a battle. That was not
400-pound gorilla off the back.
Yeah, it wasn't just like especially being in their position where they're supposed to win. Where they're like, "Hey, this isn't looking so good for us right now." And then to their credit, they
Well, you
battled
question
back,
everything, right?
Yeah,
The other thing I wanted to say about that is, two more things. Is one was, so after the game, you realize, talk to a couple dads, and one dad goes, "It's over. It's over." I go, "Yeah, I know." He goes, "No, but it's over. We're not coming back." And it's like, "I know, bud." And I said, "I know, but it is that reality because you think you always have time." And it goes back to like what we talk about minor hockey, even like youth hockey, is if you don't have like a super honest self-awareness or self-assessment of yourself, then that last day or the reality hits you across the head like with a shovel.
It shows up quick,
Right?
Yeah.
So you could say like, oh, he still has a chance to move on, and he does. Like these people do still, but the reality is, as of yesterday, last night at like 7 o'clock or 6 o'clock, they have no idea where hockey's taking them now. Some of them,
Yep.
right? Some of them are going to university. Some of them are going to go to maybe the American League or whatever, and some are just not sure yet because they don't know. So that's like a kick right in the head because that's not what you ever planned for, right?
Yeah, I just want to jump in because one thing that is interesting that people don't really, I feel like people don't think about this, but especially from the parent perspective, youth hockey from the time your kid puts skates on, you're 5 years old, and from 5 to 16, they're it's basically the same thing. Like there's not much. There's like obviously you start to play travel a little bit more and you go on more tournaments, but youth hockey feels like it takes a long time. And it's kind of like when kids are in grade school, you go from JK all the way up to grade 8. Like that could be 8 to, if you do both years JK SK, it's like 10 years that you're in grade school.
Pretty much. Yep.
Then you get to high school, and high school is only 4. And then you from youth hockey, it's like you're 16, and then from 16 to 20, that's only 4 now. It's not 10, 11, 12, whatever your youth hockey was. So the time frames start to shrink way down. And so you think I'm hopping into junior hockey now, and now it's a new start, and I have all this time, and it's like for even for Charlie, it's like he's half done,
Half done, man.
just like that, like boom, and when you had 6 years of AAA, and then another however many 3-4 years of whatever house league you did when you started playing before that. So it's the time frames are shrunken down, and I feel like that doesn't register a lot for people, so it can sneak up on you, like you're saying.
Yeah. Well, so what do you do, right? Like that's why that self-assessment is really good. Like whether in youth hockey or not, like, do I work hard enough? Am I good enough? Can I get better? What is the reality of where can I actually take this in the next year or two? And that's what's it's in like next week, I believe, a week and 10 days or something like that is the OHL draft.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I said in the podcast last week is like, for some people, it's going to be like, what happened? I had thought this, I heard this, and either dropped it a lot later or not dropped it at all. It's like, okay, now what? And that's why the self-assessment has to be, should be if you want it to be a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Very honest with yourself, look in that honesty mirror and be able to work, because that's what it is. It's about working through it and getting better at the little things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the guys playing their junior, pro, whatever level it is, it doesn't matter, right? It's the end of a year, the end of maybe a career, whatever it is. It's a kick right in the head.
Yeah, you get thrown back into chaos time now, right? Because everything felt safe. You were expecting, you go back next year to training camp, you know what team you're on, you know where your stall is, you know where all your equipment is, you know what it's going to feel like, the environment, and now it's like boom, gone.
Well, so you take someone that had the talent or not or whatever, it doesn't matter the player, but let's just say it's you, Eric, and if you sit back and let's just say you knew over the last couple of years, it's like, let's just take physicality, right? And if I was to tell you as a coach or scout or whatever, said, Eric, like, you have to be more physical. You need to engage in those battles a little bit more. You're a good player, but without this ain't going to happen. Or your shot stinks, or whatever that thing is, and you chose to hear it but not hear it, or not actually do something about it, like do the hard lifting. When it comes to the end of it, that's your regret, right? You go, Jesus, like if I would have, but now it's just too late. So it's like when you hear things that are quality criticism or advice, look in the mirror and say, is that true? Like, could I be better at that? And as a player, if are you battle tested? Like, are like, did I give everything I got? And then it eliminates some of the sting, but it's very important, man. Like, if you want to get to other levels, and that brings me to my next point is, because it's so hard to move on. And I don't know if you really get it until you get it, like, you're going through youth hockey and you think you're pretty good, but are you, like, it's so hard to get to a higher level, like to a junior level. Like, I'm not even talking CHL, USHL. I'm talking just to like a lower level junior team where kids are 4 or 5 years older. Like, it's hard. But to get to that next level and to next level, it's like there's so many good players willing to do so many little things. And like, I was looking at some of the kids yesterday, and it's like, you're a good player, right? You played on the best teams growing up. Like all these kids played on the best teams or the best leagues. They're the best players growing up, and they get to that level. It's like, wow, it's there's nowhere else to go. Like it's so hard. So like so we're getting into the off season for this team and other teams, and teams are going to start getting eliminated in all levels of hockey, NHL included. And it's like, okay, so what do you do from there, right? Do you reflect and say, okay, I need to work on this? Do you go to the gym hard? Do you take a whole bunch of time off? What do you work on? And there should be a plan in place to make yourself better. And I was talking to a guy today, and this morning, and he said, he was given something for my kid. He said, this might be something that would help him. And I said, yeah. And I mentioned, I said, yeah, look, I'll probably throw that out for him, an idea. And he goes, yeah, and I don't want him to like it. And he goes, because that's the key, right? I want him to do it because it sucks. And I said, that's a great point. It's a great point because it's just harder and harder. But it's looking at, I got to do this thing that sucks to make myself better and longer lasting and all that kind of shit. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting.
Yeah,
man. It's
sure.
Interesting, man.
Those are good.
But you don't
get
lessons, it until you're in it.
Yeah.
And then this is the reality. Like we talked about in our podcast the other day, is you can talk about this team's interested. I'm going to get this. But it's like we'll see.
Yeah,
we'll see.
Yeah,
it's freaking hard, man.
Yeah. So that, I think that kind of sets up nicely a question that we had.
Yeah.
So a kid had wrote in a DM that I still haven't actually got to answer, but we'll answer it here, and then I'll answer him there. And he's kind of talking about setting himself up to get to these higher levels. So he's a AAA player, and he has a question kind of about switching teams in that ballpark, and I think that'll lead us into our topic a little bit later on. So I don't know if you want to set the question up and then go into an answer, because I know you read it, so you probably have a better idea.
Like to keep a short story long, or the opposite. Is he's he's going into second year Bantam, and obviously a pretty good player, playing at the AAA level, way out of town.
U15 for all of you.
Going into U15, and so he asked a question. He said he played on a third place team. He was offered a spot on a first place team in that league,
mm-hmm.
and they're gonna have billets for him, like they got that set up. And he said, so he goes, I know it's up to me, but what should I do? Right?
Yep, that was the question.
So that would be moving about 2 hours away from home at 15 to play at the same level. Right?
So just a couple things to set up. So this would be a 14-year-old making a decision like this, and keep in mind, like if the OHL is a goal that you have, or something that you're like, because most youth hockey players that's in Ontario, that's what they're looking at. That's only 2 years away. So he has 2 seasons, 1 season until his draft year is coming up. So he's got his U15 year, and then his draft year is right there. So now it's like starting to get serious, because this is the kind of the age we always talk about. That 13, 14 is when things actually start to get pretty real. So yeah, weighing the options on whether he should make a jump to a first place team or stay on his team, and kind of the factors that go into that. So kind of what were your thoughts on that question?
Yeah, and I'll just add to that we get a lot of questions about people in the United States of America that they live a little bit more remotely, and they look at maybe going to a place almost across the country. What do you think of that? And I mean, there's circumstances for everything, but like in a simple situation like that we have in Ontario, like let's be real, Ontario is pretty hockey rich. I'm not talking, well, we're talking money too, but there's a lot of places to play, and being on a third place team is not bad, because if you're truly the guy, or if you want to be the guy, like, then you got to help that team be a second or first place team. That'd be my first thing, as I would say. But what I would say, like, okay, so first of all, you get a call or you get an invite like that, and my first question when you get those calls is number one, it could be a compliment. Obviously, that's a compliment. We want you, and we want to move you, and we're going to put you up in a place. And I mean, it's a compliment. I guess you kind of feel good about it. And it always sounds like it's going to be better. The next thing that goes through my mind is, what's in it for them, the people that are asking. So, like, for me, and maybe I'm too, I don't know if it's old school or whatever, but it's like, what you're asking a kid to move away at 14 years old. Like, I don't know if that's the like 2 hours away for a team that's not
Yeah,
much better.
can I just stick that for 1 second?
Yeah,
I'm thinking of that. I've never really thought of that. Like the dynamic of a adult saying to a kid, "Hey, I'm gonna move you away from your house to come and play for us because that's what's best for you," or whatever. If that's the perspective being offered, that's kind of a weird dynamic. I've never really thought of that. Like you're saying to a 14-year-old, "I'm gonna pull you out of your house to come play here." Not that it's always bad necessarily, but just that it's kind of a weird thing.
especially when you're like you're far enough away to move,
Yeah, right.
but cost your parents a ton just to go to your games and practices. Like, it's an issue, but
Yeah.
like for my thing there, like as a parent, I'd be like, okay, this better be so unreal, like, or my situation must be terribly bad for me to do that because
Hmm.
number one, who wants their kid to move away at 14 um, with any real, like, you're not Connor Bedard, Connor McDavid type of
Yeah.
status where it's
Right.
like, yeah, we got to get going somewhere, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
So, but like from an adult asking that, it's like, okay, what's in it for you? And I see this happening at younger ages. It's like, you don't have to move, man. Like, you don't have to move. And I'm not saying it to this kid like, don't be stupid. I'm just saying, like, you don't have to move. Like, you really, like, trust me on this. The team, and told me the team that he plays for. It's a very good organization. So so you stay there, man. You stay there. And you play with your friends, and you go to school, and you live with your parents, and you try to make that team better. That's my advice, unless there's something dramatically different than that.
Yeah, I think to your first point that you said is there's circumstances that matter. And I think just maybe if we can generalize it kind of to anyone who's in a similar situation, the basic questions you're asking yourself are how is my current situation? Like is it a situation you need to leave?
Yeah.
That's number 1,
And
you
those
know?
situations to me are dramatic.
Yeah. And they do happen,
Hmm.
but that's number 1. So because the grass isn't always greener, sometimes people put a sweet deal on the table, but you don't really know all the ins and outs until you're there. So that's number 1. Then number 2 is what's the situation you're going into? Because people can say whatever they want when they offer you whatever the deal is. But like I said, until you're there, they need to be able to explain to you what is the benefit to you. And then the other thing is if you're on a weaker team and you're a better player, and then you hop on, we say this all the time, you hop onto a better team and maybe you're not now. Maybe you get less opportunity. So my thing, because people, this is a pretty common question. People ask about switching teams, and the two things I always say to them the two things I always say are, what's your situation like, and what kind of opportunity are you getting in the place that you go? And that's putting other variables aside, like can you afford to do this? Like how much money does it cost? What are the other variables in your life that would make this good or bad? Just from a hockey perspective, those are the two questions: your current situation and what's the situation you're going into, what kind of opportunity you're going to get. Those are kind of the questions that you need to answer. And so for this guy, it's if you don't have a serious issue with the team that you're on, like lots of scouts look at your team, man. Like
Oh,
lots of scouts
this
are in that
organization
area.
plucks a lot of
Yeah,
players out of
right.
there.
So it's like, what's the benefit of moving if it's not you're not in a bad situation
Hmm.
necessarily? Just because the other team's a first place team, that's not necessarily better for you
Well, in
and
their
your
first place
development.
last year.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Right.
So people are just real quick to do that. Think like, and I've made this point before. It's easy to say if I had this, if I had this, if I had this, or if I was there, or if, then it would all be better. And it's not necessarily true. It's easy to play that game and say, well, yeah, if I had what he had, or if I had, and you don't even know if you had the same thing that somebody else had, maybe it wouldn't be as good, maybe it wouldn't work or whatever. You don't know. So it's just you have to be very careful and actually weigh the options before you
Yeah.
make a decision like that.
Yeah. I remember having a couple. Well, more often than not, but many coaches, across the river or up the 401 saying, "Hey, Andy, can you talk to this kid? I want to get him on my team." And then da 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 da, and they're like selling me. It's like, man, you're selling me to sell a kid and the family to have their kid move out. It's like, and I know that, and there's a couple of them. Like, I wouldn't let my kid go anywhere near you. It's like all you care about is having the best team, not necessarily the development, right? And I've seen these guys, but anyways, the other side of it is when I see people moving away, not all the time, but many times, usually might not be the word, but heavily weighted that a lot of these people that move away from their home centers are the problem. The dad can't figure out how this every organization's a bunch of idiots, right? All these people don't know what they're doing. There's never a good coach. There's never this, and they're ones that are bringing their kids across to another team or whatever. And it's like, but you're the problem.
Well, there's a term for that. You're called a suitcase player, right? And that's the term in the hockey lingo. People call you a suitcase if you're jumping around team to team to team because it's actually you. That's the issue. And I played with so many guys like that they'd be on our team for 2 months and then on the next team and then on the next team because there's always a problem wherever they go. So it's like maybe you're the problem. That's a good point. But the other thing I want to say too about for parents too, but for players that haven't moved away before, and I guess for parents too that haven't experienced somebody moving away, like it is really hard to move away, man. Like when you're young too, as a grown up, it's different. But when you're a kid and you still have that developing brain, like moving away it's not an easy thing to do because it's not just about hockey. That's the problem, right? If you're just going to practice and play a game and then everything's fine, that's not all there is. You know, you're not sleeping in your bed. You're living with strangers. You have to reestablish your friend group. You're switching schools. You're totally out of everything that is normal to you. And if you're not a very particular kind of personality or a very particular, or you're particularly prepared for that situation, a lot of kids don't handle it very well. You know, like I was telling a story last week. We had a workout with a bunch of the junior kids that were in here, and they were asking me about like what happened with me when I played, and I was telling them one of my stories from when I was away. And a kid that plays junior had a good year last year. He said to me, "Hey, he's like, man, if that would have happened to me, I would have called my mom right away. I'm done." He's like, "There's no chance I would have sat through that. No chance." And I'm like, "Yeah, man, like it's tough. You think it sounds sexy. I'm gonna move away and play for this team. It sounds cool." But there's real life that happens attached to moving away, you know.
And
So
it's a lot better when things are going perfect.
well, for
It makes
sure.
it a lot better. But
Yeah,
when
for
things are
sure.
not going perfect, that's where it's very, very, very hard.
Yeah. So
Very hard.
those are the things that you want to
Yeah.
keep in mind when
But
those
I
decisions
would look
happen.
at like, like just as we're on this topic, I would look at like this. Remember, I said earlier in this podcast that how hard getting to the next levels are. So again, the moving away and and even like everything that goes into the intensity of the parents and the it's like it's so important to make these huge decisions. And it's like if you're actually being realistic, where do you actually fit in this going to play, make money at hockey life? So like a lot of the times that's where I sit there and I really struggle with it. I don't struggle with it, but I shake my head and go, for an adult to do this with their kids, it's like, okay, but why are you doing this? Because are you betting on the fact that you're going to be on a better team, therefore your kid is just going to be a good player and make some money or get his school paid for? Because he has to be really, 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 really good and tough it out for a long period of time. That's why, you know, yesterday at the end of a season, you look at kids and they're going, now what? Yeah, you're a really high draft pick and it's nothing against you. You just it's you couldn't foresee that. When you were 13 or 14, you thought for sure you were going to be the next one. Not the next one, but you were going to be in that top 1 or 2% because you always were. But things change and it's like if you're making these decisions and your kids or your family look at the player and you go like, hey, he's okay. Well, that's to me it's not worth the move. It's not worth the move at all. It's you'd have to be like head and shoulders above everybody ever play with or play against to come to the conclusion that yeah, maybe it's a good idea to go and play under the best coach or the
Yeah, and I
whatever
think
system.
it comes back to like the philosophy that I think both of us share is that we talked about last week. If you're good enough, people are going to find you wherever you play.
Well, that's the thing.
So if you don't subscribe to that philosophy, then I don't know what to tell you. But because we think that, and it seems to be true from our experience, like it doesn't matter where you play, man. As long as if you're good, you're good. And we're gonna see in 10 days another example of that happening. You know, so
Well, like I mean, dude, you see organizations like if you were drafted in the first round of the OHL, CHL team, whatever league it is you're at, so USHL, whatever. Second round, that means you're a top 40 pick in the whole draft. You would think that your chances of getting in games and feeling fairly comfortable are fairly good. But if you look, there's a lot of teams that don't even have their second rounders playing because it's too deep or they're just not ready, right? So it's so easy to overvalue your talent and underestimate the level of the league and other players, and that's a hard thing to do. But like,
Well, just like you were saying though, that to make it worth a move, like to make it worth like uprooting it, and then the other side of it too, maybe like as a little baby transition is there's all those other things that have nothing to do with hockey. It's like now your parents have to drive to wherever to see you. Now they have to pay for that. So that means like gas, hotels, whatever other costs are associated with that. And they're not going to tell you that when they make the deal with you to come play for us. So it's like now your parents like, oh yeah, like now there's all these other costs associated when it's already crazy expensive, you know? So like maybe transitioning a little bit into that conversation, it's like there's more to the decision making as well because in the kid's question he said it ultimately comes down to me, and it's like, well, yeah, but yeah, no, like yeah, no, right? Can your parents afford to do that?
well,
Have you
that's a
lived?
really big consideration. I mean, like, if you would have told me, and I'm pretty versed in hockey, I mean, maybe this is where I'm dumb in life, but but if you would have told me my son was moving away 2 years ago, and his school is paid for, the team, it's the OHL packages, so I'm not going to explain all that stuff. Like, it's not costing me one thing for him to be in Guelph. Cool, we'll just go watch him play once in a while. Well, I'm still a dad, and I'm going to go to as many games as possible because like it's halfway done already, right? So I do go to as many. Like, there's very few games that I miss. It's my life now. I've set up my life in a way where I have the luxury to do it. Right? It's not costing me. It's not costing my business. It's not. I've got the time and the freedom to make these decisions. So it's like this is how I. This is my vacations. Is watching my son
Yeah,
play
right,
hockey.
yeah.
So what does a vacation cost? It costs money and time. So if you would have told me a couple years ago that it's I'd be putting this much of money in my gas tank every week, especially as they're going up and up and up, I would say, well, geez, I don't know if I can afford that right now. And staying in a hotel, or I don't stay in hotels all the time, but and going out for dinners and all this stuff.
Yeah,
And then you
eating
give your
out.
kid,
Oh
hey
yeah.
kid, I know that you're living on pittance and you want to go hang out with the boys tonight and you want to have more than a Subway sandwich or something like that. Like, here's $50 or $100. Have a good weekend with the guys and all that stuff. Like that, now it's costing you money again.
Yeah.
So it's like it still costs you a lot of money. Hockey is expensive.
Yeah.
Right?
Seriously. Yeah. And I think I wanted to talk about that again this week because you had a nice little rant last week. I was listening to it when I did the edit,
Okay.
and we started talking about how someone had sent me a article about parents trying to buy draft picks, like so trying to get their kids drafted to teams in the OHL, and so we were talking about that, and you kind of did a nice little reverse on the topic of money in sports not being all bad, because it's really easy for people to default to, well, this guy's getting paid, who'd you pay for that, like, and it's a real negative, there's a real negative tone to it when anytime money in sports is discussed. And I'm not saying there's not merit to that, because of course there's those situations where money can make things a little bit muddier than they should be. But you were kind of pointing out last week the flip side to a lot of that, where it could be actually beneficial to have somebody with good intentions that's trying to do good, even if it's not fair, because some teams have more money than other teams, and so they get to go to better tournaments, or they get to have better equipment, or they get a better experience. And is that fair to the team that can't afford to do that? Not necessarily, but it is what it is. So it was nice to hear kind of you flipping the page on that. And while we're acknowledging the monies where it could be negative, because of course that happens, it's also appropriate to have the conversation of where that can actually be beneficial and how much that actually helps kids develop in whatever way. The fact that there's people willing to put money down, or put time and money both, but to invest in whatever way they're investing to help kids develop in a youth sport to whatever degree. So it's not just one without the other. It's not just all bad. So it's kind of nice to hear you put a spin on that. So I want to kind of revisit some of the things we were saying last week about the money thing. So I don't know, do you have any starting thoughts? You want to just go into one?
Actually, before we go into the money thing,
Okay.
you said something that I've been very, very hyper aware of lately. Is you said, like, you throw the money term out there. Is that the word? the money aspect of the game. Like people can finance things, and people have a negative tone right away. For the most part. I mean, sometimes you go with it. Well, because I remember being a kid, and we had one dad that, or maybe it was the sponsor or whatever, that for the first time ever, we had matching helmets, gloves, jackets. Like we looked like a
Look like a
team.
team, yeah.
Like, and it was like I was like 10 or 12 and whatever. And it was like, that's amazing. Like, we were so thankful as kids, right? And I never looked at it like the dad was trying to, or the sponsor was trying to get something out of it. He was just like, he was just probably a nice guy. We might as well fricking match, guys. You guys
Yeah.
look like
Yeah.
hillbillies out here, right?
Yeah.
But so going back to the negative thing is like, what I find in the game of hockey is there's such a negative tone, and for some, maybe for a lot of the reasons, it has to be because you're looking at a lot of times, like if, like, say you're scouting or you're picking a team, you're looking at good, but you're also looking at negative, like what's not good about a player, right? When you're looking at a team, you're looking, it's like there's a negative
It's
tone.
easier to pay attention to the negative. Yeah.
But what I really find is there's a really, really, really negative tone. Like people love to find what's wrong with somebody. Like you have a good player and they make a mistake and people love it. And it's like, guys make mistakes. Guys don't have their best day every day. So I've been very hyper. Like sometimes it's funny. Like sometimes there's people you do want to say, dick, right, whatever. But for the most part, you got to give the devil his due sometimes, and find what's good. But it's just because it's so easy to go down a negative path, and then you see people walking around, they got the mad face on all the time, and they're not enjoying the process. It's like, try to enjoy it, right? So that's what the first thing is. Like, there's a huge negative tone, and I encourage parents and kids to like we say all the time, there's enough for everybody, and if someone does something well, like, it's okay to acknowledge that they do it well. I mean, if it's your competitor, you want to step on a little bit, but it is a good thing to acknowledge when someone does something well.
Yeah, well,
Very well.
I think just two things on that. If you can't acknowledge when someone else is doing something well or they're contributing in a positive way, or you can't find the positive thing, then you just end up hurting yourself by not identifying the thing that's positive, because that's something that you could do or try to do or whatever, So that's one thing. And then this episode in no way is dismissing the fact that there can be negative things with respect to money, right?
Oh,
like
God, no.
we're not saying you can't, or that nothing negative ever happens when there's money in sports or whatever. The point is just to kind of shed some light on some of the more positive things that maybe you didn't think of, or you are there, but you just don't normally acknowledge, because when things are regular, people don't point them out. Like the fact that your kids all have matching stuff, like there's money there. You know what I mean? The fact that your team feels like a team, there's money there. So it's just pointing that out. It's not ignoring the fact that there's negative parts to this. Obviously, it's just there's enough time spent on that, and especially because normally when you talk about money, it's with respect to some negative issue that happened. So it's just easy. It's easy to do that. Like there's enough of that. So it's just kind of the hope would be to shine some light on the other side of it. So one of the things you said yesterday, or last episode, was the idea of like paying coaches. And you kind of used the example of yourself. So I wanted you to revisit that a little bit again. You could use yourself as the example if you want to, or just like how that's actually a beneficial thing if you're able to invest a little bit of money in a decent coach, and kind of that line of thinking.
Yeah. So the benefits of when I coach?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. Can you do the example again you used last week where you were talking about if you were a coach? So if I wanted to get Coach Andy as a coach, walk down that path again.
Yeah. So when we're talking about coaching, like almost every team that you play for in youth hockey, and I'm even going to go say, like, once you get to, like, this is life, right? This is like the negative tone. This is the negative tone. Is the coach is always an idiot. Parents think that, like, it's so funny. You hear some mom or some dad saying how the guy's an idiot, man. Like, no, he's not. He's making 150 grand or whatever coaching in the OHL. He's not an idiot. I guarantee you that. He probably knows something that you don't know. So maybe stop analyzing the game so much and just watch, because they actually do know what they're doing. Some more than the others, but whatever. So, like, let the coach coach. Like, seriously, let the coach coach. Like, I can't even say that anymore, because nothing is going to be that dramatic as far as X's and O's goes. They're kids, right? But let's just say what I said last week is that you're with a team, and someone has the means to get a good coach. And I'm not talking X's and O's only. I'm talking you've got someone that would be good for the kids. The intentions are good. There's maybe their life is together pretty good. Maybe they're fit. Maybe they have a good business. Maybe they have a good job. Maybe they're a teacher, whatever it is. And they have good qualities about them. And on top of that, they enjoy coaching hockey. And on top of that, they happen to be very good. Well, if that person has their life together and you go up to ask them to coach a team, like if their life's together, it's probably together. They probably don't necessarily need to be coaching a youth hockey team. True?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. And so that's where I was coming from when I coached. That was sort of me. Did I make myself sound great there?
No.
I'm just kidding.
Okay.
But
So you're
but
doing
that
fine.
was the appearance, right? When
Yeah.
I coached Charlie's team after I did that, it was because I was the dad that, come on, coach the kids, man. And I'm like, okay, I'll just coach them. That didn't cost anybody anything.
Yeah.
I was just being a good dad at the time.
Yeah.
And it was appropriate because he was so young.
Yeah.
But when I coached in Detroit those years, it was like I was the skills coach. And the feedback from the parents is that the kids really, really like you as a person, because they would walk in as their skills coach in Detroit, and they would walk in and I'd talk to them. And it wouldn't be like just joking around. I'd talk to them and see how they're doing and how they feel and tell them jokes and, just be a good person for them. And we'll go to a game here and there and watch them and, got along with the parents. And, most people felt like I was a pretty good dude. And I was very good at what I did. And I made the mistake, if you want to call it that, of saying to the people with the right ears, saying, I just love these kids, man. I'd love to have the opportunity to coach them flippantly, not meaning I want to coach them. I just said that would be a real fun thing to do.
Yeah.
Listen, I had a business that needed my attention because it wasn't like totally built yet and could run on its own. I was the face of it and the thing, right? So they heard that I even thought about coaching. My phone was ringing off the hook. So the offer was made, would you coach the team? How much do you want? And I'm like, and I said, like, listen, here's the deal. I don't really, I said it like flippantly, but they said, no, let's talk. So it was like, okay. So I said, I'm not going to give you a number because too much, I'm a jerk, or I'll get way overpaid, which maybe I'm the dummy for that. And then if I go too low, then I'm a dummy for my family. So I'm like, this is in your hands, and maybe we'll talk about it. So, anyways, there was an offer. Talked to my wife, and I said, it'll be good. I wasn't getting rich, but I did fine. So that was that. I did that, and I enjoyed it. And so when people say, if you look at just that isolated situation, should it be a negative tone? There's one person that was responsible for the bulk of it. The organization paid another part of it, which they do anyway. So there was that piece that was going to go anyways. And so was that negative? It's like they looked and they wanted someone different, someone that knew the game, that was going to be good to the kids. So it wasn't like someone was paying just for their kid to get an opportunity. So like the reason I said that last week is because most times it's just a negative thing. There's who's the money guy, who's the sugar daddy on that team. And it's like, it's not necessarily a negative thing. Maybe there's people that have, and there's people, as this person did, had a lot of money and more money than he knows what to do with. And he decided to create an atmosphere for his kid and his kid's team. That was a positive one. And it was a very, very positive one. And at the end of the day, everybody was happy, including me. And I'm not saying happy because I made a ton of money. I got paid for what I did, and it was fine. I mean, I probably should have just stayed at work. I would have been done better off there. But I really, really enjoyed it. I had good relationships, got good friends for life. But it wasn't negative. It was a positive experience. So sometimes that actually happens, and I don't want to ever, because that's what we do is we just assume it's just a sugar daddy thing. It's like it's actually good for the kids sometimes. Now, there is a flip side, a huge flip side, where some of these guys do it to control the team, to control their kids, to control ice time, to be in the know, to maybe have connections, and to do all the things that we hate about the game. And that happens a lot. but it also happens with good intentions as well.
Yeah, I think that kind of moves into the buying team stuff too, where you were mentioning that a little bit last week, where whoever has a lot of money will buy teams. Because I had that happen in my life. One of the kids that I played with, his dad just kept buying the next team up, and it was for that reason. It was for the control reason, and you can see when that happens because a lot of times, most of the time when that happens with teams, it doesn't work out. So even if that person keeps control of the team that they bought or whatever, people leave, the team doesn't do well. It never goes according to plan when there's somebody who doesn't know what they're doing that just has a lot of money controlling the situation. And that was a situation that happened when I was playing. I remember in junior, the guy that bought the team was like way over involved. So it was like this coach, then this coach, then this coach, then this coach, and it's still happening with that team because he still owns a team. So it's like the problems that you can run into with that are definitely there. But to your point, when you coach those kids in Detroit, it's like you still talk to some of those kids. It's like,
All the
you know what I
time.
mean? Like you still keep in touch. These are like you said, you made friends with parents, you made friends with the kids. Where like a lot of those kids now are adults, and now you're actually kind of friends with them in a similar relationship like you and I would have, where you talk to them like that. So it's like, is that bad? Was that a bad thing that this guy said, "Hey, I'll pay to have this guy come and coach us"? And like those things happen. But from the outside now, you can look at that team and be like, well, they got this guy that pays to get this coach or
That
whatever.
you could look at the coach bag as there's that dirt bag again. He just goes around taking money from parents, and and some of it is very true. I
Yeah.
know guys like that.
Mm-hmm.
They coach 2, 3, 4 teams. You can't do a good job with 2, 3, 4 teams. I'm sorry, right? But there are those guys out there, and they are. You know who they are. You know who they are. It's pretty obvious, right? Like you can figure that out pretty quickly. But yeah, like there's people that buy teams for their kids, and you know who they are. You can tell right away. They're control freaks, and they're the dad that can't. They have to watch every practice to make sure that the practice is run the way they think it should be run, and their kid is getting the right attention, and the kid is being treated good, and they know the line matchups and everything's going on, and they have the pretend conversation about we're playing this team, this guy you might want to look at him on the power play. It's like, dude, you're the dad, or you're not a hockey coach, man. Like, let the coach.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
So I was saying last week as well, is it doesn't make, like I'm just like, okay, Marty St. Louis coaches the
Yeah, that's where I was going.
yeah, Marty St. Louis is coaching the Montreal Canadiens. What did he do before the Montreal Canadiens? He coached his son's Bantam team, I think it was, right? Of course. Why not? Why wouldn't you want him as your coach? Now, if you take someone like I don't know, something like that, they dedicated their whole life, and they did it the hard way. Right? Nothing was easy for this guy, and let's say he wasn't coaching the whatever, but he was in youth hockey, and someone hired him to coach the Toronto Marlies or something like that. It's like, that's a good dude. Like, that makes sense. But for him, if he didn't coach right now, if he said, "I'm going to invest into a junior team,"
That's where I was gonna
yeah,
go. That's
I'm going to
my
invest
thinking.
in a junior team. It's like, you can't sit there and say, "Yeah, he's doing it for his kid." It's like, no, his expertise is hockey. He knows the ins and outs of it, and it's a passion. Just like the guy that fixed cars all his life, he bought an auto mechanic shop, and that's what he does. Like, why would he go be an accountant?
And then his son comes there.
Yeah,
to learn how to work.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, exactly, right?
It's the same thing.
Yeah, so it's like, it's not necessarily negative, but there are people that buy them because they just can, and and if their kids are good enough, I mean, you got to give the kids credit if they make it. But some of them, like, they get really pushed into these spots, and they have no reason to be there, but that's what dad wanted, and that's kind of life. And it's like, but whatever. There's good and bad to both sides of that, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I think with the players too, it's funny because a lot of times or people will say like, oh, that kid only made it because his dad, or only made it because this, or because they paid or whatever. But at the end of the day, at a certain point, the kid just has to be good enough, or they won't make it. Because no one ever talks about the story of the guy that paid to have his kid go all the way and then he didn't make it. No one ever mentions that one. They just mention the one where, oh yeah, the only reason he's on the team is because his dad, whatever. It's like, well, how about the 15 dads that did the same thing and it didn't work for them because the kid wasn't good enough? So there is a bit of a baseline there where like the kid more or less has to be good enough to be there in the first place, because there's not a lot of times where a kid is obviously not good enough and they just keep getting shuttled along. It doesn't really
Yeah.
happen, you know?
Well, like you could take my kid for example. Like, are you shocked that he was a hockey player?
No.
Being honest, being
No.
honest,
Yeah.
right? Would
Yeah.
you be shocked if he ran a multi-million dollar? He was totally into numbers and accounting and business and never played sports. You'd be shocked because his dad doesn't do that, right? So because you got to just change gears sometimes and call it what it is. Like when I see someone like I'm not going to name names here, but some people in town that have unbelievable businesses and their kids kind of take over, which happens all over the place, and they're sharp in business. It wasn't an accident. The dad had passion, and that was the language he spoke to his kid all the time. Is building the business, and why wouldn't he do that, right? He's doing what his dad did or whatever. So when the kid gets his business, the dad's business, was it a gift and he didn't have to do anything for it, or did he actually have to spend time? Did he go to take some school, or was he doing this? Did he grow up in the business and understanding how the shop floor worked and blah 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 blah, and he knew it from an early age and could run you know what I mean?
Yeah. Or then, because people always, they'll bring up like the nepotism,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Where you just do like friends for, or favors for friends or family members or whatever to get them up in the organization. And it's just a lot of times they are just a good option to have doing it. So like if my dad runs a business and I'm around him all the time, and then he's had this other guy that's been the manager for a really long time, but for the last 20 years I've also been at all the meetings and with everyone. It's like, is it bad that my dad picked me to do it? It's like, I don't know if that's always bad. Obviously, again, there's a flip side where it could be bad.
yeah.
But
And the nepotism can be bad. Like it's
of
like
course.
I do hate. Not hate is a strong word for this, but I strongly dislike when you see a situation where you actually should be on this team. You're better than the kid, but it's just that you don't have the same last name, and therefore, sorry, dude. I feel terrible for you, and I feel awful, but I mean, I'm not a big fan of that because I feel like if you're gonna do this is the integrity piece for me is that if you're gonna have a team, you want to do your best to put the best team possible. And if you take a spot away for your own kid, it's like I'm not a big fan of that, but
Well,
you
yeah,
make the rules.
yeah, but this is why I think my general theme for all this stuff is because, like I said, we're acknowledging both sides of it. There's negatives, there's positives, but it depends on the circumstance. Where people mostly just throw blankets out. They just say it's all this, it's all bad, it's not good, whatever. But it's just kind of like a case by case thing. You can't just say no matter what, it's always a bad thing. And I think that kind of comes into when we're talking about training and like the cost to play, because there's another thing that people always complain about, which I'm not saying there's not an argument. There's definitely an argument to be made that things cost way too much, and there's a lot of waste. As in most organizations, as they start to scale, there's a lot of waste when it comes to things that you have to pay for. But you like there's a for the people that are running things to do a good job, like, should it just be charity? Like, should it just be all volunteer work? So like should PowerTech, for example, should we just be volunteer? Like, it doesn't matter. We're just gonna everyone can come for free no matter what.
Not if I want to eat.
That's what I'm saying. Because that's the other thing is because we'll get comments sometimes on some of our videos where it's like, oh yeah, meanwhile you charge whatever money for your camps and for
Yeah,
this
it's a
stuff.
business.
It's like, yeah, it's still a business.
No, I never
Like,
never hit that.
you have to incentivize quality, and the way that our society is structured is that money is the incentive for quality. That's what it is. So if you want to show up to a trainer, you're going to have to pay for quality, and there's ways that, because that's something that I genuinely try to do, is I try to make the workouts as cheap as possible, because I know people pay to go on the ice because that's the more expensive thing. So I try to make things as cheap as possible, but at the end of the day, it's like, this is how we live. Like, you need money to live, and there's things where, like, we'll cut as much as we can to make things as affordable as they can be for people, while still being competitive, so that we actually have a business. But people right away, they jump to the cost of everything and complain about like, this costs this much, this costs this much, this costs this much. And it's like, yes, it's annoying that it's expensive, but you also have to kind of have a brain about what you're buying and what you're paying
Yeah.
for.
Yeah. Well, there was a big thing in youth hockey because a lot of times they don't show you the books. We've tried, not me, but there's parents that are like, okay, well, let's do the math here. and we don't always know what the math is, but there is ice time. There's you got to pay refs, you got to pay maybe some coaches a little bit here. They got to pay whatever the budget is, and who knows? Who knows? I don't even know, but it never seems to add up. But insurances and all that stuff. But who knows? I don't know. A lot of times it's hidden, or and maybe people are making money, or yeah, for sure they're making money or whatever. But you know what? It wasn't going to stop me from playing, having my son play hockey. It's a great game. If someone figured out a way to make whatever X amount of money and it's not killing us, then whatever. I didn't really care. But for some people, it's a soft spot. But I mean, I don't know. It's a weird thing to try to dissect.
Well, there's two. Yeah,
because you're going to give in at some point. You want to play.
Yeah, for sure. But
there's a reason that people are on the boards for 30 years.
Yeah,
most people aren't just really nice people.
But it's the same. It's the same both sides thing too. Like if you're gonna go, if you have to go spend, like this. The other thing is things don't just cost what they cost. Like it's easy if you come on for a camp. People, it's easy to run the numbers, right? So if you're out there and you're like, okay, I paid this much. There's this many kids. There's this many people on the ice. It's easy to run those numbers, and you can think you're coming up with the number of how much is being made, but you don't see any of the behind the scenes things. You know, like one for example that I always think of is we have a software that runs that tracks all of our programs. Like we have to pay to use it. Like it's not a free software. So that cost is built into our camps because we have these things like that you would never see or think of, you know? And that's why it's funny when you hear people
this facility wasn't like I just got to move my stuff in here for no reason.
Yeah, right. It's like this doesn't cost anything. All this equipment, yeah, right.
Yeah.
So, and people don't think about those costs because they jump right away to like everything's so expensive. And there's things that are just blatantly ridiculous. Like we go to the Hockey Life and there's a $450 stick when you know they make them for $15. It's like that's annoying for sure. But it's not necessarily that all things are like that. You know, we have to find a way to make it work because a lot of times those things actually do make the game better, even though they're annoying and they cost a lot.
Well, so you know, I talked to this about a lot of people with a lot of people. So when I had my kids growing up in sports, I never really. Everyone says you need the best skates. That's a common thing, and it's like it kind of makes sense, but for me, it made zero sense because I looked at the skates that I skated in when I was 4, 6, 12, 16, like when I played junior and stuff. If someone put those boots on right now, they go like, how do you skate in these? They're like 10 pounds a pair. I skated really well. Like, and the type of skate wasn't really an issue. The sharpening, I never paid attention to. I just sharpened my blades, man. Like it was nothing. So when we grew up when kids grew up, I bought them good skates, but they were never top of the line. And they're always, so if let's say there was the Bauer, whatever
Total One.
So what are they called?
There was a Total One. That was
One.
That was the top when I was like getting into junior.
Yeah, they probably think you're 48 years old now. But okay, so let's say it's the Bauer Total Ones. Yeah. I would take the knockoff of the Total Ones.
Yeah, like the one step down. Yeah.
A year later. Mm-hmm. So those, let's say they're $800 skates, which would be cheap right now. I would pay $350 on a bad day.
Oh yeah,
yeah. Like that's what $350 would be like, no problem. And because I like common sense to me was like, I know how to like. It wasn't the skate that was going to make me the skater, right? So whatever boots I was wearing, maybe it was a very very small percentage that would change. And for youth hockey, really doesn't matter. You can skate on anything, but also you're going to grow out of it. So why pay $800? Like if you went through, my kids did that a couple of times. They went a couple pairs of skates a year just simply because they grew. So 800 plus 800 is 1600, or 350 or 300 times 2 is 600, right? So that made sense to me. Now the sticks, on the other hand, if I was making one investment that made a difference to me, is the stick, because, and I don't, and I'm blaming the companies for this one. Because if you get a good stick, it's balanced, right? It just feels different. It's light, but it's not, there's no heaviness anywhere. As soon as you step down, if you want to go the next model down, you grab that stick and like the bottom just drops. It's heavy. The blade feels like there's a 5-pound weight on it. And it's if you don't really know, it's subtle. Then you go handle a puck or shoot and you're going like my shot's off or whatever. Because I was doing a camp in the States one time in Saginaw. and broke my twigs, and I had to get an emergency one. I usually get my sticks, delivered or whatever. And so I went to a sports shop, got what I thought, didn't really pay a lot of attention. Looked good. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Went on the ice. I'm like, oh my god, it was like not hurting, but it was like heavy, and I was like, I felt like garbage. So you shoot a puck and whatever roll. So I would say, like, if you do make an investment, the stick is a huge one, like for your shooting, because it's just balanced out. Back when I played, you could say, well, yeah, you used Cohos and Titans back in the day. Yeah, but they were balanced equally. You couldn't find one that was better than the other, really. So now, like, I would say, like, if I was investing in something, I'd get a good quality stick. So you could still go and get top end stick from last year or the year before. They're really good. But so if you get, let's say there's this brand is the top brand. If you just follow it down a year or two, you're going to get a deal on those sticks. But if you go buy the top one, it's going to cost you, I know that some of the Americans can't believe it, but like $400, $500 for the stick. So you can get a better deal. Now, the companies that do it, it's like, come on, man. Like, why can't you just make a balanced stick? But there has to be a tactic to it, right? Like, like in your opinion, being the engineer that you are, if you make this stick, this is our best, lightest stick. Why and it costs this much money? Why? What would make the difference in the? Why would they not balance it out for the next model down?
Because then why would anyone buy the top model?
Exactly.
Right? Like that. That's all the incentives.
Yeah, but paint it like paint it shitty. No, but really, like, I don't understand.
Because
why make a shitty stick?
Because this is why. Because people aren't.
I know.
People aren't stupid. Because they're doing what a lot of people know, the things you know when it comes to buying products. It's like if I go to buy a toaster, it's like I don't need to buy the one that just came out yesterday. It's like if I buy one that's secondhand from last year, it's gonna toast my bread, man. You know what I mean? So people know that about buying products. So if you're a company trying to sell a particular item, like your big ticket item, if that's what you want to push people towards, then there has to be significant difference with that one down. And that's why skates, like, it's hard to make skates. You can't make a skate unbalanced because that actually will affect your skating because it's very specific. So just like the boot altogether could be a little bit heavier or the material is not quite as good, but it still feels like a skate. It still works like a skate. It's not something that's actually going to affect what you're doing. But if you have a different distribution of weight on a stick, it's like that actually will affect things. And it is subtle when you pick a stick up. If you're not tuned to it, you can't tell the feel, but and that's where the cost thing is annoying to me, because for these companies that it's $400 for the stick, it's like, are you guys serious? Are you guys serious? Like, that doesn't actually have to be the cost, and you guys would still make a killer profit. That's the thing. How much money do you need to make, man? Because we did that. You had a video that went like crazy viral a long time ago. Where you were talking about like how people can't afford to play, and that's the part that bothers me. It's like the needless costs of things. It's like we don't have to go to Nashville for a tournament. That's annoying. Like, do the sticks have to be $400? They don't have to be $400, man. And but that's just the way the market competition is pushing everything right now. So it would take a company to try to make the quality as high or like basically as high, and then not care about maximizing the profit margin, because that's what most businesses do. What do they charge? What do they charge? What do they charge? And then you set your price point based on those other things. Those are the things that bug me. But there's like inherent costs, like we're talking about certain types of training and certain types of things where that cost is not a bad thing, because you need to incentivize people to do a good job. So if you want quality teaching or quality instructor, whatever, that costs, yes. But a $400 stick that doesn't need to be $400 because you made it for $13, and I know you did. It's like, that is annoying. It was like when I started talking to some of these supplement companies for deals, because that's where we get stuff. Like, the markup on this stuff is insane.
Yeah.
It's the product itself costs whatever amount, and then the guy that sells the wholesale price to somebody, he gets his piece now, so that's already a markup. Then there's another markup on top of that when it goes to an actual store to be on the shelf. It's like 70% of it is markup or whatever, and that kind of stuff is obnoxious, because especially now that everything can be sold online, it doesn't need to be that way. Like, you could just cut out all middleman markup stuff and just sell direct to people, and still you get the crazy markup just because we can, or just because you dominate the market, or there's only 3 companies that sell sticks, or whatever monopoly you have. So that's the part of the cost to play stuff that bugs me. But some of this other stuff that people will equally complain about or blame for whatever their problem is. It's like, yeah, but there's got to be some. If you want things to be good, like the saying, "You get what you pay for," is there kind of for a reason, you know. So that's all. That's all I had to say on that. So the other thing, maybe kind of getting to wrap up. Unless did you want to touch on the spring hockey thing a little bit first?
Well, I think if you we talk about this a lot, but it's like I would say the spring hockey and the training, the gym, like those three things. Like what I mean by train. Okay, let me say spring hockey, summer hockey, um, skills sessions, and fitness sessions. Those are the things that I think people could really actually take help themselves by not spending such a huge amount of money. Like you don't have to do it all. You don't have to do any of it. Like to the details, to the extent that people
Right.
do.
Yeah.
If you can and you want to, those like obviously if you want to, you do what you want to do. If money's no issue, then you do what you got to do. But at the end of the day, um, you know, like I always use my kid and as an example. I mean, I didn't do any of that stuff. The only what I shouldn't say that he grew up at PowerTech. Like I'm not gonna sit here and
Yeah.
say he
Yeah.
never
Yeah.
came to PowerTech,
Right. Yeah.
right? But it wasn't a forced thing at all ever.
He didn't really do like structured
No,
anything.
no,
Like he came in here and had fun. Like
dude,
he just came in here and messed around. You didn't like put him through a training regimen.
no,
So it's not, even though he came here and he had access to PowerTech and ice and whatever, like that's cool. But it wouldn't be much different than like a kid that plays road hockey.
100%,
Like,
100%. Yeah, so it's like the season ended last week for most kids, or just after that, and we got people already going to all kinds of different camps and training. It's like, my God,
Yeah.
like, so it goes back to what I said earlier about like at what point is the investment, does it actually make sense? Like is your kid like really 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 good, or what's the reason you're doing it? Is it like is it to keep them up to snuff? But like what I see is like it's to keep up with the Joneses. Like if he's doing that, I got to do that because he's gonna get better. And it's like you're not going to be a bad hockey player in 2 weeks.
Mhm.
It's not going to happen. It's actually you're going to probably come back, and after 3 minutes, you're going to be, oh yeah, we're good, right? You know, it doesn't go away. And I always use that example. If someone breaks their wrist and they can't play for 6 weeks, they didn't lose everything they lost in hockey. They're fine. They just get the rust off and you're good to go. The training part is like I get a lot of feedback. I get a lot of pushback on this, but the skills training is there's only so much that you actually need if you need anything at all. Most of your skills training could get done on your own or with some buddies, but it's okay. Like to go out and get some good stick handling lessons or some good power skating, like skating lessons, agility, shooting, whatever, or more specific, maybe the better. But it's not not absolutely necessary. So it's like when you're sitting there thinking that you have to go out every week and spending X amount of dollars, it's like, and I'm saying this, it might sound negative about it, but it's like I've seen too many guys who were just good at hockey that all that stuff didn't matter.
And the reverse.
And the reverse.
Guys that paid
Yeah,
for all
well,
this stuff.
that's actually what I mean.
And it got them nowhere.
Most guys go nowhere with
I
it.
know.
Nowhere.
Yeah. So it's
Nowhere.
like you
So it's
invested.
like it's, so I don't want to knock it because there's a lot of value in but again it comes down to who wants it. Motivated parents or motivated kid, right? And I just find most of the times it's motivated parents. Like, do you ever let your kid just make his own phone call to a trainer or to a fitness guy or to something that he's interested in? Let him make the phone call to see if he wants it, or do you do everything for him, right? So, anyways, the thing with the training is, would I ever say like if you go and do time on the ice with a power skating coach where you actually want to do it because you see it'll benefit you and you pay attention and you work on the hard stuff, would I say that's bad? Not at all. But to say as a parent that you have to get out there and do this, this, and this X amount of times, it's like that's not necessary. Do I think there's value in a kid learning how to shoot a puck, even though he's very young? Does a shooting lesson help? Maybe, maybe not. But I think there's, especially if he really wants to, and he's the one bugging you, and he goes out there and pays attention and listens to it. Like the shooting could be beneficial, or stick handling. It could prove whatever. And it's especially good if a kid has a goal. Like if I'm a dad and my son says to me like, "Hey dad, there's a shooting camp and I've been shooting my pucks, but this guy is really really good and I think to make the AAA team or to get to the next level, I think if I go to this, it's gonna, that might be a thing where I say, yeah, you know what, kid, yeah, we'll go for a couple of those. Like there's a purpose to it, right? And if you see a kid has a goal, not your goal, but the kid has a goal, and if there's something that you think will help him think that he's putting in time and effort that will help him get an outcome, I think that's great. Like especially like a gym thing, right? Like that's never a bad thing. But it doesn't have to be a personal trainer with a guy with a doctorate in human physiology.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I think this is kind of my leading into what I was gonna kind of close up on, is talking about kind of the attitudes if you don't have the money for things, and then blaming money for things. Because to your point, it's like you have all these options and things you can buy, and people bitch about the cost, but it's like you don't have to pay for all of these things. You don't have to go to the spring tournament. You don't need all the training. You don't need all this. You don't need all that. It's like you can make things work. Like we did that episode talking about like solo skill development. Like if you're doing it on your own where you don't have any resources, and we mapped out like pretty practical solutions depending on what kind of budget you're working with. And it's like, it doesn't have to be because you saw a 10-year-old go to the Quebec tournament that, well, this is bullshit because who can afford to do that? It's like, you don't have to afford to do that. Like that actually has no bearing on whether or not you develop as a hockey player at all. So there's that component of it where a lot of adults, especially because we're talking youth hockey, they get real bitter and they get like real cynical, and they have a lot to say about the money here, the money there. And it's like, yeah, it's here and there, but that doesn't mean you have to be doing it or that's going to get you ahead or whatever. Like people spend money the way they want to spend money. Like if you don't have a Lamborghini, you can still use your car to get to work. It doesn't have to be the most expensive thing ever. And I think that's one of why I wanted to do this episode, to kind of point out those two sides of it, where it's like, yeah, you can play that game with all the negative stuff because everyone does that. But then there's a flip side where it's like, if you just are rational about what's going on, most of the things that you're complaining about either don't really affect you or don't need to affect you, or you don't have to be making those investments anyways. And again, that's not saying that nothing negative ever happens with money. Obviously, with every single thing we talked about, we pointed out the positives and the negatives. But as the parents, like you guys, if you're going to complain about all this stuff, like actually pay attention to whether or not it's an investment that you actually have to make, especially when it comes to like the cost of playing and those types of things, because there's ways around all that stuff.
Well, 100%.
Yeah.
And for me, if a team, well, no, forget it.
What do you got? Nothing?
No, I was gonna say like if I was playing on a team and they said, okay, like the coach is gonna cost another $3,000 or $4,000 for each player, I'd be like, okay, I'm out. I can't do it, man.
Yeah. I'm gonna wrap up with a quote again. Do you know who Howard Zinn is?
Howard Zinn?
Zinn. Howard?
I don't think I do.
He's a historian, I believe.
No, don't know him.
Let me see. I'm gonna see who he is. Yeah, historian, playwright, philosopher, and a socialist thinker, World War II veteran. This is my quote. Pessimism becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. It reproduces itself by crippling our willingness to act.
I like that.
That's a good one.
Yep.
Kind of ties into the topic here today. So that's all. We'll see you guys next week.